So let's jump into some stats right away. So 20 to 25% of women will be sexually assaulted at some point during their college career. 3% of college women nationally are subjected to rape or attempted rape during the academic year. This means, for example, that campuses with 6,000 co-eds will have an average of one rape per day during the school year. 42% of college women who are raped tell no one about the assault. 13% of women are stalked during the academic year, and each stalking episode on average lasts about 60 days. 60 days. That's a long time. Oh. Ugh. 90% of women who are sexually assaulted during college know their offender. 75% of the time, college sexual assaults, the offender and the victim both have been drinking. Female first-year students are at higher risk for sexual or physical assault from the day they arrive on campus until Thanksgiving break. Less than 5% of completed and attempted rapes of college students are brought to the attention of campus authorities or law enforcement. When it comes to first-year students and that first section of them getting to school, a lot of times they're away from home. It's the first time they've been away from home, away from parents, not having all those rules. And they're exploring. They're exploring their sexuality. They're exploring a new life, essentially. And, and that's when they're the most vulnerable. So when we're talking about this 5%, maybe they told a friend, but they don't want anybody to know. It's not that they're not telling, it's that they're not telling the campus authorities or law enforcement. 71% of rapes are premeditated, planned in advance by the perpetrator. 48.8% of college students did not consider what happened to them as rape, even though researchers consider the incidences to be rape. Maybe they were out drinking with some friends, maybe they consented at one point, but then they withdrew that consent, so that's maybe where this is coming into play. 43% of college-age men conceded to using coercive behavior to have sex. This includes ignoring the women's protests, using physical aggression, or forcing intercourse, but they did not admit it was rape. So if you think about going to college, how social other people are with each other. So this is a factor that is contributing that it's a very social environment. You're often, even in classes, required to engage with each other. You already have that engagement. You go to a party, you have alcohol and drugs mixed. Then you're already contributing to these factors. But again, that is not an excuse for rape or sexual assault to happen. Additional factors. So we got gender roles, communication difficulties between young men and women, and struggles with sexuality and identity issues. The communication difficulties, that can come into play when we're talking about people coming from different areas and interacting with each other, maybe not knowing how to communicate with each other. That's where the struggles and the difficulties might come from. So what is the impact of sexual violence in students in college? A lot of them might be similar to other survivors of sexual violence. In nearly every case, victims cannot perform at the same academic levels as they were prior to the attack. They might miss class more frequently, unable to carry a normal caseload, withdraw from courses, leave school, or transfer schools. They may even avoid the perpetrator. Maybe they withdrew from one class but not this other class because the perpetrator's in the one class and not this other one. So that might be something to also consider. So, continuing with the impact, because 90% of rapes on college campuses are committed by someone they know, it's likely the perpetrator is part of the social group. In addition to the barriers that already exist in a culture related to identifying as a rape victim, having your perpetrator be your roommate's friend or the guy that sits next to you in band, or for example, making what happened to you rape even harder. Additionally, to those who identify as victims, coming forward with this report may be asking your friends to choose sides. Because they know the perpetrator and see them often, and because seem like a nice person, right? Until the assault happens, survivors may be concerned about getting this person in trouble. They often blame themselves. Sometimes survivors may also share a classroom or residence hall with this perpetrator. This makes reporting unlikely and also has consequences for recovery. I mean, just imagine seeing your perpetrator daily, multiple times a day. Some students are concerned about disappointing and angering their parents. Such victims want to protect their parents and protect the image of their parents often have of them. Being a rape victim does not fit this image. Parents may find out they're drinking and maybe find out they're just breaking some general house rules that maybe they had when they were home. So what are some options for the victims? Community options like us, a forensic exam at the hospital, or any other place that does the forensic exams, a report to law enforcement. It may be campus law enforcement depending on the college and jurisdiction. Campus, they have anonymous reporting, campus judicial process. And the only problem we see with this is a campus system isn't necessarily victim-centered and sexual violence trained, so they may not completely understand the whole spectrum. So this part explains what campus judicial process is. They establish whether the perpetrator was violating a school policy and imposing a sanction if found responsible. It was found that only 10 to 25% of students were expelled when these judicial processes came forward. So along with that, they may have to tell their story. The victims may have to tell their story multiple times. Talk about re-traumatizing. A victim may not be notified of what's going on. Light punishment for the perpetrator if they are found responsible. I mean, there's no saying that they wouldn't get this in the criminal justice process. But also, even advocates can accompany victims to meetings or hearings, even when it comes to the campus judicial process. So, Title IX is most often discussed in relation to sports teams and athletics. Indeed, Title IX has guaranteed the right to participate in sports for women at the same level it exists for men. But what Title IX is really about equal access to education. If a university has knowledge of a sexual assault against one of its students, by one of its students, it must act. Sexual assault is considered a form of extreme harassment based on the person's sex, and the school is obligated to adjudicate perpetrators of such actions that deny equal access to education. So they're strictly going over their policies and procedures on how to handle these complaints, and the willingness for a perpetrator and a victim to participate in this process. So since Congress never defined what constitutes an education record, some schools have applied FERPA's provisions to pretty much cover any document that names a student. This law has been an issue for sexual assault cases because some schools have used it its existence an excuse to keep a key secret of the outcome perpetrator adjudication. It is now clear that FERPA does not protect any of this information from victims. Not knowing what happened really sucks. It really does. So this slide and the next one goes over the Jean Cleary disclosure of campus security policy. Campus Crime Statistics Act. This is where crime data must be collected and reported by higher education institutions whose students receive federal financial aid, and establish Victims' Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights includes giving the alleged victim and alleged assailant equal opportunity to have others present in the disciplinary hearings, and equal notification of outcomes of such proceedings, notifying alleged victims of availability of counseling services and their right to pursue remedies through local police, notify the alleged victims that they have the option of changing classes or dormitory assignments in order to avoid the alleged assailants. So, moving on from that, so what can we do? What can we do as advocates? We can support and validate the victim's experience, discuss on-campus and off-campus options, discuss availability and timing for a forensic exam, help create a safety plan, including an HRO. If there's violence in there, maybe an OFP. Inform them of their rights under the Campus Victims' Bill of Rights.